and I'll. Perfect. So welcome everybody to the Peer Recovery Center of Excellence Effective Survey Design Part 2. We're going to spend some time today with Al Anka with Aurora Consulting. This training is brought to you through a grant funded by SAMHSA. The views expressed within the training are not necessarily the views of SAMHSA and are the views of the presenter. Next slide. This is the structure for the Peer Recovery Center of Excellence. So we have 4 teams that work to make up the whole center. So we have a team that works on integration of peer recovery supports. We have a team that works on building capacity of recovery community organizations. Our 3rd team works on developing and growing and supporting the peer recovery workforce. And then our 4th team works on building evidence-based practice toolkits and disseminating those out to the public. And then, of course, our language matters. So if we want addiction destigmatized, we need a language that's unified. So we use person-first language in all of our dealings. And we always want to refer to someone as their name, but never refer to them as their disease or their diagnosis. And then a little bit of housekeeping, if at all possible, we'd love to see your faces. It helps the presenter know that he's speaking to people. It helps us know. We will be going into some breakout rooms too. And so it's really nice to have those on for the breakout room sessions. So thank you all for turning your webcams on. Today's session is being recorded. And then please try to keep your line muted when you're not speaking. We do have a smaller group, so we will have a chance to verbally participate, but when you're not speaking, do try to keep yourself muted. And then absolutely use the chat feature throughout the training. If you're just coming on now, please do type in the organization you work for your role with the organization, and maybe where you're located. And then Al will post a link, if you didn't get it last time, to some handouts and materials that we'll use throughout today's training. So I think this is where I hand it back over to Al.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
And thank you, Cindy, for helping manage the meeting today. A lot of you were in our workshop on Tuesday. And I'm thrilled to be back working with you today. So I'm Al Anka. I'm a principal consultant at Aurora Consulting. We're located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I do a mix of services, mostly for nonprofits or kind of municipal organizations that are not technically nonprofits, but function like nonprofits. I do evaluation. A lot of it is evaluation capacity building, which is helping organizations understand how to use evaluation themselves. Strategic planning, which is we are participatory facilitators for, so inclusive planning processes. And then organizational leadership development, which is both a lens that we use kind of for all our projects, but also we work a lot with board of directors. And we also do organizational culture change projects. So that's just a little bit about us. And today we're talking about effective survey design. We split this into 2 parts. So today is part 2. And if you weren't at part 1, I think you'll still get a lot out of today. But I do encourage you to go back, and if you like today's, check out the video for the previous one. So let's remind ourselves what we did. So last time on Tuesday, we talked about survey purpose. We did the 4 big questions that will help you plan out your survey. We talked about participant experience just a little bit, which is how will my participants experience this survey, and did an activity where you thought about yourselves as participants and what you like and don't like about surveys. And then we started talking about survey questions by focusing on the question stems, which is just the question part of the survey, not the response options. And working on the stems first is a great way to kind of keep things simple so that you can brainstorm what you want your survey to be. Today, we are going to spend almost all of today talking about answer options, and we're going to be doing some practice to practice writing these things. We do have one more training. If you got an email about today, it had a link in it that you could use to sign up. And that training is about encouraging survey participation. So it's kind of like you already have a survey. How are we going to get a good response rate? How are we going to encourage people to take the survey? And so some of the topics that we'll cover in that hour-and-a-half training are below. At the end of today, I'm going to share a sign-up link. The center has, I think it's has paid for 4 free consulting sessions. So thank you for that. And if you were a part of these workshops, you can sign up for that and get some free consulting from me from the center. So I'll share those details at the end of today.
And that, just to be clear, Al, that will be around designing a survey or disseminating a survey, something
yes.
around, yeah.
Yep. So it's the goal is that you try to implement some of the things you learned in these workshops, and then you have some time with me to do some kind of hands-on consulting with your actual survey. Yep. Cool. Okay, so we're going to dive right in because there's a lot to cover today, and I want to make sure we have time for practice and questions. I don't think I exactly said this last time, but survey design is a big topic, right? And so there's no way that you can learn everything you need to know about survey design in one training. So what I've tried to do is give you some of the most helpful tips that are a part of my practice and a part of any survey designer's practice, and then some time to practice. The packet, which I will put in the chat right now, has all of these tips in it. This is the same packet you had last time. And so today, hopefully you'll get an introduction to all this, you'll get some time to practice, and then when you actually go to work on your survey, that packet will be a tool that you can use to implement some of the things you tried out today. So that's the idea. So with that, let's start talking about answer options. So last time we talked about question stems, which is just the question part of the question. And for any question stem, you have to decide how are people going to respond to this question, right? And so this is an image from, it's old right now, but it's from my survey software, and it's all the different things you can choose for answer options for your question. So look at all the fun stuff we have here. We've got text box, which we're familiar with, essay, date. We've got radio button, which is the same as single select. You can check one of them. We have checkbox, which is, check all that apply. And then look at all this other good stuff. Continuous sum, star ranking looks kind of fun. Maybe we should try that, right? Table of drop-down menus, all sorts of things. So when you see this picture on your own survey software, you're going to get all excited about all these options. However, I want to caution you, simple is always better with surveys. And so even though you can do star ranking, you have to really think, is that going to be the best way to get the information that I need? And so when I think about the answer options for a survey, I mainly think about 3 things. The first one is single select. Single select for the participant, the survey respondent, is the easiest thing to do. You check one box out of the options, right? If your survey has 10 questions and 9 of them are single select, you've done nothing wrong. If your survey has 100 questions and 99 of them are single select, you've done nothing wrong. You cannot use too many single select questions. because they're very simple. Sometimes you do have to do other types of questions on a survey, right? So short answer and multiple select are also usually pretty easy for participants to do, as long as you kind of implement them correctly. So short answer is a little text box that you put your name in, you put your email in, right? For those types of things, that is essential. Multiple select is the check boxes. So if you have check all that apply, you've got multiple select. Those are also pretty easy to use, but there's a few pitfalls that people fall into when they try to use multiple select. So we're going to talk about that today. And then finally, essay. People don't like typing, so we don't want to have a lot of essay questions. I said this yesterday, if you wrote 10 essay questions for your survey, you've written an interview. And you'll get a lot better information if you do it as an interview than if you do it as a survey. So let's dig into each of these, and we're going to go in reverse order. So we're going to talk about essay first, then short answer, multiple select, and then we're going to spend most of our time on single select, because hopefully that's what you're using the most of in your survey. So first of all, there's two types of survey questions. The first is open-ended, which means people can put in whatever they want, right? This is typing. So what program topics would you like to see us present with an essay box is open-ended. And close-ended is what program topics would you like to see us present? And there's a list, right? And you have to pick one. I would love for anyone to come off of a mute and tell us what might be either a pro or a con of either of these question types. What's the difference? Joseph, Joseph, you already typed something. Do you want to come off and tell us what you wrote?
Well, while open essay and short answer questions give people the opportunity to give an answer you might not have thought of, they're also a pain to tabulate.
Yeah, so what are you going to have to do?
You have to read every single answer.
Exactly. If you have a bunch of essay questions and you send this to 200 people, you now have to read 200 essays. This is the reason why teachers try to limit the essay questions on tests, because they got to sit at home and read through them all, right? Essay questions are easier to write at the beginning, but harder to interpret at the end. Because we don't have to think of, when we write an essay question, we don't have to think of all the options, right? We're just like, we'll let them figure it out. Well, now they can write anything, so we got to sort it out. Close-ended questions like single select are harder to write at the beginning because you have to really think through, like, these are the only options they're going to get to check. Like, are these the right ones? Are these the ones we care about? But they're way, way easier to interpret. If you're using online survey software, you literally push a button and you have all the results, right? You don't have to analyze anything. So let's start with open-ended, and we're going to talk about essay questions. This, I presume, little girl is happily skipping all the essay questions that you wrote on your survey. If you've written essay questions for a survey, you know that only half the people fill them out, right? That's a problem for interpretation, because you don't want people skipping questions, because then you don't know why they skipped them, right? If you have 100 people and only 50 people answered the essay question, you have to ask yourself, is there a reason why these 50 people skipped the essay question? Did they have a really bad experience and they didn't want to share it? Well, now we can't interpret the results correctly. Did they have a good experience and they're just like, I don't have anything to add, it was good? Well, that would be data you would want. You don't want people to skip that, right? So if you are going to use essay questions, and I almost always use one on a survey, use them sparingly. Make it count if you're going to use it, right? Make it really count, which means you have to understand the purpose of it. A lot of times the reason I see essay questions is because we just didn't think hard enough about how to turn it into a closed-ended question. So as much as possible, if you've spent some time brainstorming your survey, take a look at it and say, how could I turn this into a closed-ended question? How could I ask this in a way where people can select options? And then finally, if you're going to use them, have a plan for how you're going to use the results. Do the math. I'm going to have 200 responses. What am I going to do with that? Am I going to just glance through them and see if anything stands out? Am I going to do coding? Am I going to categorize them based on themes and then report on the themes? You just have to have a plan, because if you don't, then what happens is you made people spend a lot of time writing this, this answer, and then you kind of just didn't use it because it was hard. We don't want to do that, right? Okay, that's about all I really want to say about essay questions right now. Any questions about essay questions before I move forward? Okay.
I'll throw
Hyman
a
was putting
question
some
in there, Al.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for all of us out here in your audience, what if we've already done this? What if we already have a survey and we had some essay questions? Do we go there today a little bit about how can we, or would we be a good candidate to do do some one-on-one work with you?
What is your question, Chris? Like what?
Yeah.
Like,
so
how do you analyze it? How do you change it?
Change it, analyze it.
Yeah.
Like, do you change it or do you analyze it? And are there some, I realize we can't go to the depth because I've done this of how do we analyze survey essay questions, but
yeah.
Is it okay to resend a survey and kind of say, we're actually looking for this information?
I mean, I would avoid making people fill out a survey twice. If you got good response from the essay questions, that's great. I mean, I use essay questions. If you get a good response and you know how you're going to use it, perfect, do it, right? The problem is when you write a lot of essay questions and then nobody fills out the survey, or they abandon the survey halfway through because they're tired of typing. That hurts your the interpretation of the results, because you don't have a full set of results now. But looking at this slide, I mean, this is the same question, just asked in two different ways. So many of you have probably asked some kind of question like this, which is like, what would you like to see in the future? And from us, right? And it's an essay question. What happens is that people put down, when you get the responses to something like this, people either put down totally random stuff that you're like, they're like, I don't even know what they're talking about, or they put down things that are like, you would never do, right? They put down ideas and you're just like, well, that's a cool idea, but like, there's no way we could ever do that. So that seems like wasted effort. We don't want people giving answers that we can't use, because it made them think about it in a way that's like not helpful to us. So this one was rewritten. What program topics would you like to see us present? And you can imagine a program saying, hey, like, we already came up with like a bunch of ideas of things that we think, would be good to present. These are all things we could do. So like, based on the results, we're going to pick the top two. You know what I mean? It's the same kind of thing, but in this second one, they've thought through more about like, what's possible and how would we use this? And typically people give a lot more accurate answers when they're able to see something and respond to it, rather than just like come up with it themselves, right? Jennifer, go ahead.
Sure. I saw someone write this in the chat and I had the same question. What if you had a closed-ended essay question and then at the bottom had a other with a text box?
We're going to talk specifically about that next.
Oh, awesome.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Good question. Yeah, Joseph said, how can we help you better? Pay my rent so I don't have to work. Right. That's not useful to you. And worst case scenario, people give you suggestions in good faith that you know you can't use, and then they feel like you never listened to them. I told them this and they didn't do it. Right. Well, you didn't set up the question well, because it made them feel like anything was possible when you actually knew that only a few things are possible. Right. So sometimes you don't want essay questions to be like fishing expeditions, right? You want them to be very focused. Yeah. Okay. Let's look at the next one, multiple select. So multiple select is a very common question type that you see. Here's an example. Anyone come off of mute, take a look at this and tell me anything you notice about this question. Things you like, things you think are odd, whatever.
It seems to be things that whoever filled out the survey thinks are most common, interrupted by things that are less common.
Mm. Yep. So the survey designers had to come up with this list, right? Again, I always try to use examples in good faith. We don't know. Maybe they did a bunch of research and these are the top 10, things that prevent people from riding a bike. Could be. I hope that they thought about it more than just brainstormed, a random list of things. Joseph said it doesn't seem to have, I don't have a bike. That seems like it would be a big barrier, right? The thing that I noticed about this is really long, a lot of options here, right? And this seems like one question, but it's actually like 10 questions, right? Because a checkbox is a yes, no question. So every one of these things you have to read and think whether you're going to check it or not check it. It's not the same as a single select where you read all of them and just pick one, right? So this is going to take a while to go through. And it's a lot of thinking, right? And we want to reduce the mental burden of people going through our survey. The other thing is that it's just written kind of odd. Which of these reasons prevent you from riding a bike more often? I don't know how to ride a bike, right? Like, that's not how I would think of like asking that question in like an interview. It's not very conversational. It's not very intuitive, like how they ask it, right? If they check, I don't know how to ride a bike, do they need to check any other boxes? What do you think? If they don't know how to ride a bike, they're not riding a bike, right? So what if they don't check any other boxes? What does that mean? What if someone checks, I don't know how to ride a bike, but then does check some of the other boxes? How are we supposed to interpret that? It's confusing, right? They might be seeing this and interpreting how they're supposed to respond differently. So problems with multiple select. Satisficing is a really fun word that is in survey research. And I think it's a portmanteau, is that what that's called? Of satisfy and suffice. And so what this means is that when people see a big list like this, they think hard about the first few and they check a few and then they're like, I did enough, right? I satisfied the requirements of the question and my response suffices for me to move to the next one, right? But that's a huge problem for your interpretation, because if nobody checks the last 5, how do you interpret that? Did they look at the last 5? We don't know, What if someone doesn't check any? Does that mean that none of these are a barrier? Or does it mean that they skipped the question? Again, we don't know, right? We always want to know how people are answering the question. So that's satisficing. Interpretation, actually, sorry, I just did this one. If they don't check boxes, what does it mean? Does it mean no, or does it mean they didn't look at it? We don't know, right? And then usability, like we said already, it's a lot of questions. It's a lot of thinking. It's not that pleasant to do that as a participant, and it might frustrate them, and we don't want to frustrate people. So here's a way to turn a checkbox list into a series of questions. Do you know how to ride a bike? That is a very straightforward, conversational, easy answer, right? So we can just ask it. We don't have to make it into a bunch of checkboxes. Same with, do you know where you can ride your bike? That one maybe has some assumptions in it, but you get the point. Do you feel safe riding a bike, right? If you were doing it this way, you could decide, do you know how to ride a bike? If they check no, you could simply not show them any of the other questions, right? Or, if it's on paper, you could say, hey, skip to question 12. That would be a very effective way that would help you interpret how people are filling out the survey. You can use multiple select. So here's an example. Actually, I don't like the question in this example, but you'll get the idea. What days generally work best for you to visit the doctor? So here we have a list of the days. Everybody knows what the days are. It's not hard to think about what the days are. This would be a very easy question to fill out as multiple select. It would be odd to say, is Monday a good day for you to visit the doctor? Yes or no. Is Tuesday a good day for you to visit the doctor? Yes or no, right? That would be more frustrating than multiple select. So you can use them, but make sure that you use them appropriately. Okay. Any questions about multiple select? Oh, Joseph noticed that none of these days is on here. That's so that if they don't answer any of them, it means they skipped the question. If none of the days truly work for them, which would be weird, they would select that. And so you know that they looked at it and you can interpret the responses. Other questions about this, about multiple select? Okay. So now we're going to spend the rest of the time doing single select, and we're going to do some practice with this so you'll have time in your small group, because this is the one where I think you get the most benefit of really thinking it through. So there are two types of single select. The first one up here, what would you like the topic of our next exhibit to be? And there's some examples, is a list. You've simply just said, here's a brainstorm list of ideas. You could select any of these lists. You know it's a list because you could mix up the order of those things and it would still make sense, right? So you would just pick which one is your favorite. At the bottom, how interested are you in seeing a dinosaurs exhibit? And it has very interested, a little interested. That's a scale. And so you know it's a scale because it has an order to it. You couldn't mix them up. They have to go in the right order. And a scale helps you measure the degree of something. How much, right? How little. A list helps you pick something, right? So let's start with lists. And this is going to get to, who was asking that? Jennifer, I think. Sorry, I'm losing my window here. So let's start with lists. And we're going to do an activity here. So here's a question. Which is your favorite color? Red, blue, yellow, other. And you would pick something different and write it in. So go ahead and just do this. I'm going to, 1 second. There we go. So go ahead and answer this question. If you choose other, you have to write something in. So you have to pick a different color. Okay, good. Got some still flowing in. Okay, I'm not going to tabulate these. That would be cool if I did. But what I want you to do is take a look, open up the chat, take a look at all the questions or all the answers. And for anyone who said, if you said red, blue, or yellow, take a look at the other colors and come off of mute and tell me if there's a other color that you like better than the one you picked. We got a lot of purples, we got green, black. Anyone who picked red, blue, or yellow, is there a different color in here that you like better? Daniel, are you answering my question?
Yes, I am. I picked red, and I still like red. That's my color.
Okay, so that worked for you. Good. Renata says no. Okay, maybe my activity is failing. The purpose of this activity is to illustrate one of the problems with other text boxes. So this is very common in lists. People think like, oh, we want to find out what people's favorite color is. We'll list the ones that we think are most common, but then we'll just put in other text box to see like what else shows up, right? It feels inclusive, feels like you're being helpful, but also open-ended, right? But the issue is, what do you do with the other text box when you interpret the results? So one of the problems that happens is, or one of the tendencies is to say, 25% of people said red, 10% of people said blue, 10% of people said yellow. And then you just look at all the other ones and you're like, oh, we had a lot of purples. Let's count them up. Okay, actually 15% of people said purple. So purple is more than yellow. The issue, though, is that not everybody saw the choice purple. And so you have people who might have picked purple if they had known that it was a choice. But they picked red, blue, or yellow because that seemed like it was the thing that you wanted to know the most about, right? So this is a very simple fix. What I typically do in this case is pick. Well, actually, let me go to the next slide because I think I have this written down. So what you want to do here is, if you're going to have a list, you want to pick the options that you want to know the most about, right? The options that you care about. They could be the ones that maybe red, blue, yellow are the options for your new logo, right? You're only going to go with one of those, and you want to find out which people like best. That'd be a great way to use a list. If you do want to open it up, then what you do is you just split these into two questions. Which is your favorite color? Red, blue, yellow. And then you have question number 3. Do you have a different color that you like better? Right? So now everybody's answering the same questions. They're answering red, blue, yellow, and you can interpret it very well. And then they're answering other together. And so then you can interpret that. Okay. That was lists. Now we're going to go to scales. Scales are one of the best uses of surveys. scale questions. And so we're going to go through some examples and do some practice. So again, a scale has an order to it, and it measures the degree to which something, is true. Someone feels something, someone thinks something. So some tips for writing scales. The first one, this is the biggest one, and this is the one we're going to practice. Match your question to your scale. So let's look at this. I was satisfied with my service. Strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. So the thing that we want to know about is satisfaction, right? That's what we asked about in the question. But the thing that people are rating is agreement. So we have mismatched our question with our scale. Now, this is a very common way that people do scale questions. They write statements and then they have people agree with the statements. That can be fine if you are assessing something political, the political platform, of a candidate, and that candidate has said statements and you want to find out if people agree with those statements, that would work then, right? But for the most part, people misuse this question just because they see it so much. And so when we want to know about satisfaction, it's a lot easier and more accurate to have people rate satisfaction. So at the bottom, we would say, were you satisfied or dissatisfied with your service? And we have some satisfaction rating scale. Very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, dissatisfied, very dissatisfied. Right? So this is going to be a lot easier to report. If you did the top one, when you report this, you're going to have to say 30% of people were neutral that they were satisfied with their service. That doesn't really trip off the tongue, right? Like it doesn't make any, what does that even mean? It's not easy to report. With the bottom one, you're going to be able to say 30% of people were somewhat satisfied with their service. Very easy to report and interpret, right? So we call this being construct specific. The construct we want to measure is satisfaction, and the way that we measure it is a satisfaction scale. Okay, how many scale points should I have? You want to have as many scale points as you can name. You don't want to have more scale points than you can name. If you can't name them, what do they mean? We don't know, right? So you want to be able to name your scale points. At the top, were you satisfied or dissatisfied with your service? We have very dissatisfied, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, very satisfied. If this is a paper survey, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to have to figure out what number it means if people circle very satisfied. Is that a 9? Or is that a 10? We don't know because we didn't set it up well. So we want to name all of our scale points, but we don't want to double name scale points. At the bottom, we have 1, very satisfied, 2, somewhat satisfied. We're offering people 2 different ways to interpret how to respond to that scale, right? So we don't want to double label. Here is an extreme real life example of this concept. This is from a car dealership. It's a real survey that we copied. They have quadruple labeled the question. So I'm just going to look at the middle one. If I look at the top line and I was somewhat satisfied, okay, cool. I'm somewhat satisfied. I'm in the middle. If I look at the faces, I don't even know. That looks like I'm stressed or overheating or something. Not sure what that face means. If I look at the third line, somewhat satisfied is a fail. Well, I don't think that might change how I rate the question if I look at that line. And then the last one is a 0. Somewhat satisfied is a 0%. Again, if I looked at any of these and didn't look at the other one, I might answer differently. We don't want that. We want people always answering using the same scale. Okay. We want our, just like our questions, we want our scales usually to be balanced. And so I always try to have half positive, half negative options. We don't want to have 5 positive options and 1 negative option, right? Where that's going to be hard for people to figure out where they go. At the top, we have very satisfied, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, a little satisfied, very dissatisfied. Seems like a pretty big jump between a little satisfied and very dissatisfied. We just want to even that out so that people have an easier time placing themselves on the scale. Okay. Should I have a midpoint to my scale? If you have a midpoint, it has to mean something, right? So were you satisfied or dissatisfied with your service? Completely satisfied, mostly satisfied, neutral. What does neutral mean? Does it mean I don't have an opinion about whether I was satisfied or dissatisfied? Does it mean that I wasn't the one who was home when you did the service? And so I'm just going to put neutral because I don't know. We don't know. This one is hard to interpret, right? So at the bottom one, we replace neutral with half satisfied, half dissatisfied. That's more specific. That tells you why you would choose that one, right? And then finally, we don't want to prioritize. This is a more meta tip. We don't want to prioritize space over clarity. Okay. So this is something that's very common. We think that people will like taking the survey more if it's shorter. So then we put a lot of questions into a table, and that makes it look shorter. Well, it makes it harder for us to write good questions because if it's in a table, all the questions have to be the same so that they fit. There's research that says that for paper surveys, people like, well, in general, people like surveys that feel like you're going through them quickly, rather than short surveys that feel really dense, right? And so on a paper survey, I even like space out the questions so they look like open, you know, like there's white space in between them because it feels like, oh, I'm just going through this really fast, even if it's an extra page. We're actually going to look at, let's look at a bad example of a table. Oh yeah, a lot of us did this one, Head Start program. It feels like their main design criteria for this survey was to fit it on a half page. And they're like, whatever we can ask on a half page, we're going to put on the survey. A lot of these questions, as you saw last time, would be better if we separated them out and asked them independently. So they could have worked on that. You can use tables of questions. This is an example. This is one I actually did, so of course I like it. But now that we were doing a field trip survey, now that you've experienced the field trip with your students, how valuable was each activity to your experience? So we're asking about value. We're only asking about one thing, right? Value. And the table is a list of different things that the teachers did. So it's familiar to them, right? They came for the day and they know they did 4 things, and now they're going to rate the value of those 4 things. This seems like a good way to do that. Seems like an easy way to do that. Hopefully they're not doing it on their phones because tables are a lot harder to do if you're filling out a survey on your phone, which is something we typically want people to be able to do, right? But again, tables can work. You just have to be diligent about how you use them. Okay, that was a lot. I wanted to go through it so that you have a chance to practice. Teresa, is Teresa here today? I didn't even look. Yes, she is. Teresa, thank you for sending a survey. She sent in one for us to workshop, and it is a fantastic survey for us to workshop. So hopefully it's helpful for everyone here, and hopefully it's helpful for Teresa to do this. So we're going to do a 15-minute activity, and I'm going to put the link in and the instructions into the chat. So there's a one-page survey. I think it has like 8 questions. Actually, I'll just share it right now because I want to look at it too. Bear with me as I change my screen share here. Okay, so here's the survey. You can get this at the link in the chat. What I want you to do is we're going to put you in breakout rooms. Whatever number your breakout room is, do that question. So you'll see the number at the top of your screen. And if you have time, do the first question. If you have time, you can just move to the next one or whatever one you want. What I want you to do is identify the construct in the question. What do we want to know about in this question? And then revise the question so that the question and the scale match. Right now we have mostly agreement scales. And so I want you to practice writing a question where the construct and the scale match. And I'll give you, I'll do number 7 right now as an example. So number 7 is overall quality of services received from Sunrise Services. And we have excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. So the construct in number 7 is quality. That's what we want to know about, right? The scale matches. This is good. Excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. Describe the quality of something, right? So that's good. The scale is not completely balanced. We go, if I go from the bottom, poor, fair, those are kind of bad ones. Good, very good, excellent are good ones. So we have, 3 good, 2 bad. You could do a couple things here. You could cut one of them. So you could cut out very good and just have poor, fair, good, excellent, right? Or you could add another bad one. You could have very poor, right? To try to balance that out. And then should we put excellent first? It starts with excellent, right? Or should we put poor first? The research on this is that it doesn't matter. And the recommendation is that in your survey, you just be consistent. You either always start with a good one or you always start with a poor one. Just because then it's not confusing, right? But it doesn't matter which one you put first. Okay, the instructions are in the chat. I'm going to be popping around as we do our 15 minutes. Any questions before we send you off?
I have one. I'm
Yes.
about to send them off, but you have 7 questions and I created 7 rooms. Would you like me to just create 6 rooms to match the 6 questions?
If you're in group 7, just pick one of them, whichever one you
Okay.
like. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, let me know when you're ready to zoom away.
Okay, any final questions before we send you off? Okay, do your best. It was a lot of information. If you have the packet, all that information is in the packet. And I put the tips in the chat as a quick way to see what the tips were. Okay, let's do it.
Welcome back.
That was fun.
Did it work out good? I'm always
Yeah.
eager to hear how that worked in the
I'm
breakouts.
so sad I missed the first part of this training.
You'll have the video, the
Yeah.
recording. I'll be updating a little landing page with the handouts and the recordings from both so you can review.
Perfect.
But yeah, it's super helpful stuff.
Okay, we'll get everyone back.
Hey,
Good job, everyone. I hit about half the rooms. I apologize if I didn't make it to your room. Let me make sure I have. I heard a lot of good discussion, a lot of good thoughts. about these questions. I want to thank Teresa again for providing this. I feel like a lot of people leave my training feeling like their survey isn't good. I think that like the thing that I can help you with in the training is with like tips for writing questions. What I can't, even surveys that are not written to meet all these different principles and tips might still be useful, right? It may be working for you. So that's the kind of thing you have to decide when you're trying to use these ideas. So with that in mind, let's talk about Teresa's survey, and we'll be very kind about what that survey is. I actually really liked how focused it was. It had only a few questions that covered a lot of ground. It seemed like it'd be very easy for people to fill out. And you didn't put it in a table, which you very well could have done. So I like that they were separate questions. Okay, so anyone willing to share which question they worked on in their group and what the construct they came up with for that question was? What they decided the thing that question is trying to measure is.
Well, we can start. We were group 4, and our question was, I am treated with respect by staff, and the construct was being treated with respect. And we felt that the question stem was good, but that the scale wasn't balanced, because what does neutral mean when you're saying, you know, I was treated with respect, I feel neutral about that. We either felt that we were treated with respect or not treated with respect. And so we took neutral out. And then we also had a conversation earlier on about possibly changing the question stem and then changing the scale. But I, of course, can't remember what that was. So maybe someone else in my group who can remember it could say something.
Well, I think we talked about, do we need to separate out what type of staff or qualify that? Because often in offices, there'll be a receptionist or someone who greets you, and then there will be your practitioner. And so if you're really looking at, the front line versus what happens in the back room to kind of determine where you might put some action at, then separating those out. But then we decided that may be too intimidating for people to complete. So we went back to the original. Does that sound about right, Denise?
Yes. And Joseph mentioned that neutral, as far as respect went, meant being ignored, but not disrespected. So that maybe taking neutral out may or may not be a good idea. Thank you for that comment in the chat.
Gotcha. Yeah, that is a good comment. The key is that whatever that word is, you want people to feel like you want it to be clear what the meaning is, right? So Joseph might be interpreting neutral as being ignored, which would probably be negative. Other people might be treating neutral as like, it was fine. Like, I didn't really have that many interactions. There's nothing I really need to say about this, right? If you only talk to one person and all they did was help you with, getting signed in, you might be like, I don't really know enough to say, I'll put neutral. That would be very different than what Joseph's talking about. So you'd want to try to clarify what that is. I think with this one, so thanks for sharing all that. I really like the discussion you all had. I think with this one, I want to turn it into a question. and then match the scale points. So right now it's a statement that we're agreeing with. I would like to just ask it as a question. The construct, like you said, is respect. And so we would say, were the staff respectful or disrespectful to you? Right. And then the scale could be something like very respectful, respectful. If there's a midpoint, it could be like neither respectful nor disrespectful. Right. You're just like, I didn't really have enough for that to happen. Disrespectful, very disrespectful. Right. And you can imagine that would be a very actionable survey question, right? 10% of people said that the staff were either disrespectful or very disrespectful. That'd be something you'd want to follow up on, right? Yeah. Joseph said perhaps not applicable option is valid for some of these. That is a great comment. We didn't talk about not applicable, but if a question could be not applicable, you always want to have that option, because you don't want anyone skipping any questions. You want them to have an answer for every question. And so if you know that some people that are getting this survey didn't really interact with the staff, I would put that as the last option. Not applicable to me, or I didn't interact with the staff. You could even just say that, right? Or I don't know enough to say, right? You can kind of pick what makes sense. Okay, cool. Let's do another one. Someone who in a different group who did a different question. Who's willing to share?
I'll go. We did question 2. We were group 2. So question 2, my counselor and others involved in my casework. My counselor and others involved in my care work as a team. We think that's a very important question. It's so important that people see all of their providers working in a team. We thought it might be easier if it was in the form of a question, more of a form of a question instead of a statement. For example, we were playing with how well does my counselor and others involved in my care work as a team? And then with the qualifier of how well, we could use that in the scale. For example, not at all, not well, well, very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure I even like the not at all, but I just we didn't come up with anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And then my teammate Anne-Marie kind of went even further, which I really liked, and thought about simplifying the question to how well do my caregivers work as a team?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I love that.
I don't know if Anne-Marie has anything to add.
No, I think you covered it all. I think, yeah, on some of these, I would prefer they not be in a passive tense, but that they be, but that's just, maybe that'll come up. But like, I am treated with respect. I'd rather it say staff treats participants with respect. Do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, the way this survey is written is very common, which is it's statements that you agree with. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I would really recommend that every one of these be a question, and that everyone have a construct that matches the scale. So I would get rid of agreement for probably every one of these. And so I am treated with respect by the staff would be, were the staff respectful or disrespectful to you? And then you say very respectful, all the way down to very disrespectful. I think the one you're working on, my counselor and others involved in my care work as a team, I think the suggestion you had is a great rewrite of that. I think this one is an opportunity. If I were the consultant on this, I would be like, what's really important to you here? Because like, if I'm the participant, I would probably be like, I don't know if they're working as a team. Like, I just see the people that come in and they have charts and, you know, whatever, I'm making this up. I'm not in their team meetings, right? How do I know? You might actually care about, do you feel that you are supported by a team of caregivers, right? It might be more about a feeling, because right now we're asking about the quality of teamwork. That's the construct. They might not know the quality of that team's work, but they might know whether they feel like they have a team of people supporting them, right? So that's where we really dig into, like, what's the thing we're actually trying to measure here? What does this participant know about that we can learn, right?
So I can say what the construct was now that you know.
Yeah, please.
This is Teresa. So what we're getting at with that question is coordination of care, and we don't want somebody going into their physician and disclosing a bunch of information that is really important to their counseling, and then that word not getting on to the counselor. We want to make sure the staff is communicating so that when the client comes into their counselor, they don't feel like they have to tell the whole story again. Like their team is working for them.
Yeah. So now we're getting to it. Thank you, Teresa. Now we're finding out that what we really want to know is how often have you had to repeat information to other caregivers? Right? All the time, hardly ever, right? If you find out that people are saying, I often have to repeat information to different caregivers, you've answered the question, right? Because I didn't talk about this in this. I keep meaning to write a blog article about this because or maybe I talked about it on Tuesday. One of the big mistakes we make as survey makers is we ask the question that we ourselves need to answer rather than the question that they know the answer to. So we need to understand whether our caregivers are working as a team. The information we need from them is how often have you had to repeat your information to different caregivers. That's the thing they know about, right? This is it's a hard thing to practice as a practitioner because we think in our own questions, right? We think about what we care about. And this whole survey is not all that, right? Number 3, treatment options are explained to me in a way that I can understand. That's a very participant focused question, right? That's what their experience would be. They would be able to answer that, right?
So, Al, should that one be posed as a question also?
Yeah, every one of these should be a question.
Okay.
That would be my recommendation. How well did you understand your treatment options? Do you see how, like, once you start to get the hang of writing this, it's actually so much more natural. It's almost like we've learned to write them the more complicated way because of how we've seen surveys in the past. If you were just having a conversation with someone, you would say, how well did you, you just went through this thing, like, how well did you understand what was explained to you? Right? That's how we would ask it. That's what we're always striving for as surveys, is that natural, conversational, straightforward language, right? Yep. Cool. We've got about 10 minutes left. Any other, thanks for all your work on this. This is great example, Teresa. Great work, everyone. Other questions that are coming up for you about this activity or about your, maybe one you worked on? Okay. This, I'm going to switch gears for a moment. I really apologize to do this with 10 minutes to go. But this came up on Tuesday and I wanted to address it because I think it will be helpful probably for people. Let me change my screen share here. Someone asked about doing pre-post questions. So a pre-post question is about measuring change. How do we measure the change of something? So like, how satisfied were you with your services is not a change, right? It's an experience. And they just say, I was very satisfied. Okay, great. Change is a little different. So, and there's a couple different ways to do this. And I just wanted to give an example of each. The first one is pre, then post. So this is where you ask a question. I used the bears question. I made this yesterday, so I used the bears question. How much do you know about bears? And they would rate that, right? Nothing, a little, fair amount, a lot. Then you'd have something about, like you do some kind of training about bears, right? They go to the bears event, right? And then at the end of the bears event, you have another survey and it has the same question. How much do you know about bears? And then, so now you know how much they knew about bears at the beginning, you know how much they know about bears at the end, and you can measure if there's a change, right? This sounds like a good way to do this. This is pre then post is a very effective, accurate technique if you have a ruler. If you want to find out how much weight you lost in 6 months, measuring at the beginning of 6 months on the scale, measuring at the end of 6 months on the scale, and then comparing the difference is the best way to find out. It would not be good to say, hey, how much weight do you think you lost over the past 6 months, right? We don't know, but like, what do you think? That would not be accurate, right? Now, the trick is that for surveys, for the most part, we're always asking about people's opinions, no matter what. Even if we ask them, how much do you know about bears? They're having to make a judgment and pick one of these questions, right? Or one of these options. I know a fair amount, right? I don't know everything, but I know a fair amount. Then they do the event and they have to answer the same question at the end. Now, the question is, are they using the same measuring stick at the end as they are at the beginning? They might have gone to this event and been like, holy cow, I had no idea the world of bears. I know only a very little bit about bears. So now their knowledge decreased because they went to the event, right? They're measuring their knowledge with a different ruler than they did at the beginning. So was the event a success or a failure? Well, the knowledge went down. So that's not what we wanted, right? But if we instead asked the same person at the end, they went to the event, at the end we said, how much did you learn about bears during this event? They might be like, holy cow, I learned so much. I learned a lot, right? So now we did the same thing with the same, we did two different ways with the same person. In the pre-post, their knowledge went down because they learned how much they didn't know. In the post, we call it a retrospective, they're reflecting back on how much they learned. Their knowledge went up, right? So for the most part, we don't have a ruler when we're doing surveys, right? We can't just measure people's weight. So retrospective, in my opinion, is usually the way to ask this question that best matches what you want to know, right? How much did you learn about during this event? I learned a lot. We don't know how much they think a lot is, right? But usually we're interested in their opinion. So if they think they learned a lot, that's what matters, right? They may judge a lot differently than someone else, but you know, for them, it was successful. So for the most part, I usually do a retrospective question. What's another way to ask a question like this? Let's see, let's say you're doing a job training. Because of this training, has your confidence increased or decreased in your job hunt? You know, something like that. And they would say it increased a lot, right? Again, especially with confidence, we're not trying to measure a very specific thing. We just want to know what they think, right? We want to know what they think about their own learning. That's what we're best able to measure. Now, if you really do need to know how much people learned about bears, like in a very specific way, then you need to do a test, right? You need to do an assessment. It's not a survey. Those are different things. And for the most part, if you're doing an educational thing, like we don't want to do tests, right? We want to get people's opinions. So a little bit of information about this. If you downloaded the slides before yesterday, this slide is not on there, but I put this back into that participant packet. So if you go to that link, you can download this and the slide will be on here. Okay, I want to close with just a little bit of information about this survey consulting, and then one final reflection for you. So the survey consulting, where is it? Go away. There it is. Okay. The center has contracted for this opportunity. So thank you very much. We have 4 spots and you can apply for them. I just put the link into the chat, and maybe this can go out in an email as well. Take a picture of this with your phone if you need a copy of it. The requirements to do the consulting, we want you to have attended a training, right? So everyone who's here qualifies. If you're doing the next training, that's great, the one in July. If you're not, that's still fine. I encourage you to do the next one, but doing these trainings is enough. I would prefer that you have a draft survey, something that you have either done in the past, like Teresa sent us, that you'd like to improve, or something you're working on. So if you have an idea that you want my help with, try to write up some questions and send them to me. And then I would also like you to think about what your questions are for me. That will help our hour together be more effective, right? If I know kind of what you're interested in. So you can write some of those. When you go to that application, it'll have some, it's a survey, but it'll have spots for you to fill in this stuff. Any questions about the consulting? How will I select? Basically, I'm going to see how many people are interested. If there's more than 4 people that want to do this, I'm going to look for people who meet these requirements first. And then if there's still more than 4, I'll probably just do like a drawing and select the 4 that are going to do it. Okay. Yes, Denise.
When will you select the 4? After this one or after the one on the 8th?
After this one, because
Okay.
if there are people who only come to the 8th, I think people who came to these ones can get priority. So,
Okay.
yeah. And then the goal is to do them in July or August. I did put a field in there. If you have a deadline that you know you have to, that you want to do it before, you can just tell me what it is and we'll do our best to make that happen. Okay, my last question for you, and I'm happy to stay on, you know, after 1:30 if you have things you want to ask me about related to this. But my last question for you is the same as last time. What is something you learned today that is relevant to your survey or something you want to do in the future? And this is a question for you. This is for you to think about. What do I want to remember as I leave today? So go ahead and, if you like, type something into chat, and I'll hang out and answer questions and say thank you very much and turn it over to Chris.
And before Chris, you jump in, I think it's very generous for you to stay on, Al, and I can give you a few minutes, but I actually need my Zoom room for an upcoming
Oh, okay.
meeting.
Sure.
But yeah, if you have questions, I can hang out for a few.
Yeah. Okay. Or you can put them in chat and I can just do them.
Okay.
And you can email me too. You have my email address on that packet if you have a question you want me to answer.
That's very generous, and we have you here, so anyone who wants to jump in, you've got about 5 minutes.
Oh, and I think we'll send out an evaluation after this, Cindy, I think, or is it?
Yes,
after?
we have one, and that was a good question. Chris, I wasn't sure also if this was going out after survey design or survey participation, but I think
After the next one, we'll do it at the end of that.
The-
We'll send it out by email just in case folks here
Yes.
don't.
I'll make sure all people that attended have the opportunity to weigh in on that.
Cool. We are at 1:31, and I do want to honor Cindy's Zoom room. So what we'll do is we can download this chat and I can get that to Al. And of course, like Al said, do reach out to him if you have any questions, and then we'll get back to you about, or Al will reach out to you if you're one of the lucky winners of the consulting time. And if there's a need, Al and I will discuss too how many applications, and maybe we can open it up to a few more people. So if there's a lot of interest, we might be able to respond. So I thank you all for your time and going along in this ride with us.
Yeah, we are gonna put together a little landing page. You'll have a URL that'll have both recordings, session 1 and 2, and I'm guessing possibly the participation one. I'll make sure the handouts are there, and Chris and I will talk about any contents of the chat if that's important. But we'll make sure you have everything, and that'll go out really soon.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Or
Next
so.
Tuesday.
Yeah, but it will come your way. So thanks so
Yes.
much, everybody.
Thanks,
Have a
Al.
great day.
Loved it. Learned a lot.
Thanks, Al. Great training.
Thank you very much.
Bye, all.
Bye.